Bumblin Biden is being utterly humiliated on the world stage as the liberal globalist order collapses all around him. In this video, we're going to see how Biden got spanked by President Xi of China. We're going to see how China is but the latest in a whole line of nations that want nothing to do with this weak and woke regime. And stick with me to the very end of this video when I'll reveal the needed geopolitical solution once we finally send Bumblin Biden back to Delaware. You are not going to want to miss this. Greetings, everyone. Dr. Stevie with you. Great to be with you. As always, I am your daily fake news antidote. So come on in your Patriot Professor's Den where I help you to think better so you can feel better in these crazy and turbulent and insane times. So you know what to do. Make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. Before we dive in here, did you know that The Economist financial newspaper recently said that the stock market has lost over $1 trillion so far this year? You heard that right. $1 trillion. So, for example, the big tech giant Facebook has actually fallen out of the top 10 tech stocks, and all the markets had the same jitters. Like, you know, people were worried, really worried about their financial future, except those with gold and silver as their backup plan. They had the peace of mind knowing that with precious metals in their IRA, they'll be just fine. Noble Gold has thousands of clients who safely invested with them. They, like you, started off hearing an ad just like this one, and they called the experts, not a call center, but specialists who will give you your best options. And for the month of March, with any qualified IRA over $20,000, you get a 3-ounce silver American Virtue coin, or for anything over $50,000, you're going to get a 5-ounce America the Beautiful silver coin. So you know what to do. Click on that link below or call Noble Gold Investments at 877-646-5347 or visit their website at noblegoldinvestments.com. That's noblegoldinvestments.com. All right, gang, let's dive right in here. I think it bears repeating, but since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, or what Putin calls their special military operation, began over 3 weeks ago, I have promised to fulfill my role as your fake news antidote. I mean, after all, if you think about it, the very same media that peddled the Russia collusion hoax for 3.5 years, followed by the constant refrain that Hunter Biden's laptop was nothing more than Russian disinformation. That very same media is now claiming that they are informing us accurately about Russia. So for the last 3 weeks and a half, I've been doing my best to fulfill my role as your fake news antidote by answering coherently 3 overall questions. First and foremost, what's actually happening on the ground in Ukraine, with a particular view as to both what caused the conflict and where are we going? What's the end game in all of this? And secondly, the issue of why Putin tends to like to expand his borders whenever Biden's in office, either as president or vice president. In other words, what's Bumblin Biden's role in all of this? And finally, third, where do we go from here? Regardless of how the crisis in Ukraine ends, how is the world going to change as a result of this? Those are the 3 overall questions that I've been trying to answer for you on this channel. And while there are many different answers and proposals to those questions, certainly all very interesting, very valid and the like, my answer to all 3 questions revolves around the notion that Russia, for right or for wrong, for good or for ill, either way, Russia has in fact emerged as the first post-globalist civilization state that has officially brought an end to the liberal globalist order. And so I'm interested in trying to understand what that involves, how it accounts for the invasion, how it accounts for the Biden regime's completely underestimating Putin and what he was willing to do, and how it's going to change the world from here on out. And we've had several events happen over the weekend that do indeed confirm that the Biden regime, as well as the liberal globalist order, are indeed imploding on the international stage. Let's start first and foremost with Russia itself. As you all know, Bumblin Biden and the EU imposed a blitzkrieg of sanctions on Russia with the goal of getting the Russian economy to collapse. However, to their utter and complete disappointment, that simply has not happened. The Russian ruble did not, in fact, collapse the way the Biden regime thought it would. The ruble has relatively stabilized after the Russian central bank raised interest rates to 20%, and also since Russia has required all nations sanctioning them to pay for Russian exports in rubles. Secondly, Russia has largely weaned itself off from SWIFT, which has up until now been the default international interbanking transaction platform. After 30% of Russia's banks were expelled from SWIFT, announcing they announced that they would instead be using China's alternative financial transaction platform called CIPS as a substitute, which in turn is now cutting off upwards of 25% of the world population from SWIFT. Thirdly, when Visa and MasterCard announced that they would be sanctioning Russia, well, Russia's domestic Mir card, it's called their Ruski Mir, it's used all over the Russian world. It suddenly became very, very popular, especially as it's being linked up to China's Visa and MasterCard substitute, which is called the Union Pay system, which is actually substantially bigger than Visa and MasterCard. And then contrary to what we've been hearing from the Bumblin Biden administration, Russian oil and gas exports continue unabated. Yes, the United States, as I understand it, is still receiving Russian oil and gas exports, as is Europe. And they will continue to buy Russian oil and gas for the foreseeable future. Again, rhetoric notwithstanding. And so the implosion to Russia's economy simply has not happened. Russian officials appear to be very well prepared for the all-out blitzkrieg of sanctions from the dolts in D.C. and the bullies in Brussels. And again, for me, that's best explained because the Russian government is intentionally trying to build themselves up as the first post-globalist civilization state that is completely self-sufficient, replete with its own self-contained economic sphere, totally independent of the liberal globalist order. So that's the first failure on the part of Biden. He simply hasn't been able to cripple Russia economically the way he had hoped. And now we're seeing the consequences of that failure on the international stage, and that takes us to what happened over the weekend. On Friday, Biden had a 2-hour video call with China's President Xi, and the call was, by all accounts, a complete and total failure for Sleepy Joe. He got absolutely nowhere in trying to convince China to push back on Russia. In fact, not only is China refusing to call Putin's actions a, quote, invasion, they won't even call it that, but Xi turned the whole conversation around on Biden and how unpleased China was with the U.S. actions towards Taiwan. So Biden called about Russia, and Xi turns the conversation around and made it all about Taiwan and how the U.S. needs to butt out. The Global Times, which is the official mouthpiece for the CCP, wrote a blistering article saying that China will never, ever be bullied or coerced by Washington, D.C., and that China reserves the right to respond however China wants to the Ukraine crisis. And if that includes military support for Russia, then so be it if China sees it in their own national interests. I mean, it was a stinging rebuke of Biden. And frankly, it's a not-so-subtle revelation of how China sees the current status of the conflict. Obviously, China believes that Russia is firmly in control of the situation and is going to prevail. Otherwise, China would be mediating some kind of peace settlement to help Russia save face amidst a clear military disaster. So contrary to the mainstream media, I would see this reaction of President Xi towards Biden as a confirmation that China's intelligence on the ground in Ukraine sees a war going decisively in Russia's favor. So Biden, in many respects, was humiliated in that meeting. And frankly, that's just piling on the humiliation Biden already got from Saudi Arabia and UAE, United Arab Emirates. We talked about this last week. You may have heard about the widely reported story that the leaders of both Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates refused to take Biden's calls when he tried to reach out to them to pressure them to sanction Russia and ramp up their oil production. And to add insult to injury, that snub came on the heels of Biden begging Saudi Arabia the previous week to ramp up that oil production. Saudi Arabia told him to take a hike. And again, to make matters even worse, now Saudi Arabia is currently in talks with China to price some of Saudi Arabia's oil sales in the yuan, which is the Chinese currency, which of course is a direct challenge to the petrodollar. So not only are we seeing the swift worldwide financial transaction platform being replaced by China's CIPS platform for a considerable portion of the population. Now we're even seeing the possibility of a competitor to the petrodollar, which in of itself calls into question the position of the US dollar as the world's default currency. It's really crazy stuff. But if that weren't bad enough for the Biden regime, it's now been confirmed that India will indeed increase its imports of Russian oil, allowing it to boost energy supplies at a significant discount on the world energy market. Once again, we're seeing Biden's efforts at trying to isolate Russia's economy thwarted by another nation that, like China, represents 20% of the world's population. China and India, together with Saudi Arabia and the UAE and a whole host of other nations, are actually rallying around this new Russia as it asserts itself as a new post-globalist civilization state. So Biden is failing again and again and again and again. And this, of course, raises the question, what on earth do we do here? I mean, besides getting rid of this disaster that is the Biden regime, what do we do? How do we handle this new world we're living in? I believe this is where the United States is going to have to put together a coherent policy for a post-globalist geopolitical order. Unfortunately, it seems that most of the Republicans have yet to come to terms with that. The latest comments coming from someone like Newt Gingrich appear to demonstrate that, well, frankly, he's still living in the 1990s. He actually thinks not only that the United States should confront Russia militarily and try to overthrow the Putin regime, but he's actually convinced that that could actually happen, that Putin is so unpopular at home and the United States could effectively orchestrate a military and economic campaign that could effectively overthrow Putin. And we've got to understand in an increasingly multipolar post-globalist world, those days are over. As Pat Buchanan has been arguing for years now, we have to learn to get along with nations, especially now civilization nations, rather than constantly trying to overthrow them. Because in the end, our failure to come to terms with the rising post-globalist world may result in our overthrowing ourselves. Now, before you go, make sure to check out my latest video I just uploaded on the bombshell admission by the New York Times that exposes definitively the media's coup against President Trump. You're not going to want to miss it, so make sure to click on that link, and I will see you over there. God bless.